So welcome back to XR at Work. I'm Scott.
And I'm Dane.
And oh yeah, go ahead. Tell us what we're going to talk about today.
Sounds good. Last episode, we talked a little bit about where a good place to start is for someone who's looking to delve into the XR space. One of the technologies that we mentioned was remote assist, and how that can help companies to better utilize their resources globally, connect people where travel may be restricted, etc. So today we're going to kind of be taking a deep dive into remote assist to get an understanding of how it's affected us in our careers and the companies that we work for, and how we think it could be better or what we do like about it as it is right now. So Scott, do you want to kick us off with how you guys use remote assist currently?
Yeah, I mean, so again, and we'll link to the previous episode where I said this initially, but I'll say it again. I think remote and it goes by a lot of names, right? You'll hear remote assist, remote expert. Since remote assist is the name of a vendor's product, I try to say remote expert, but either way, right?
My bad, sorry.
No, it's okay. We're not sponsored by that big software company, so we'll see how much love we give them. But we, when I set out 3 years ago in my job with these 300 factories, I purposely planned to set remote expert as the kind of the initial technology to roll out. And I did this for a couple of reasons. One is because it's relatively simple. It's very valuable, right? And we'll talk about that today. And it also gets you into factories or into construction sites or onto into the warehouses in a way that you start to introduce simple technology to people. You can use standard devices, handhelds that they already have, and you start to build some rapport. You also identify where you maybe have gaps in your Wi-Fi coverage, right? Because of all the stuff that I say this all the time, of all the stuff that we do in XR within my group for my employer, there's only one thing that has to have a constant, solid, stable internet connection to operate, and that's remote expert, right? Everything else can be cached offline for the most part.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point, because a lot of times industrial Wi-Fi networks are designed for IoT sensors and other systems where it's periodically pinging and sending data. And so the bandwidth is not designed for 40 people to be in 4K video walking around in a facility. And so I think that's an interesting constraint that we have from the industrial side is, I don't mean to pick on any headset, but being able to pick something up and use it in a low bandwidth environment is really important.
Yeah.
And that's something that like a consumer user wouldn't think twice about, right? Because everybody's Wi-Fi at home is streaming Netflix and whatever else.
Well, everyone at home doesn't live in the middle of nowhere in a concrete wall factory with a bunch of electronics running around them, right? So they're in metropolitan areas with wood walls and good signal. Yeah, not the world that you and I live in, right?
Yeah. Well, so let me ask you a question. Do you consider Teams on a phone to be remote assist?
So, man, we've gone round and around about this, right? So
yeah, we have too.
Thanks for lobbing that one up, right? So here's what I get all the time. So let me tell you the big thing that I get, right? Sometimes when I explain how a remote expert call works, right? Is I get people that go, well, I just do FaceTime, right? So I get that. I've gotten that a lot, right? And so I have a standard answer for that. Sometimes they care, sometimes they don't, right? So, and I'll get into Teams in a second, I promise, right? So let me address the FaceTime thing. Let me give you my thoughts on this, right? So I say to factory workers, yes, you can do FaceTime. You can use your phone. You can FaceTime someone else that you know that has an iPhone, and you guys can do FaceTime calls, right? Now, number one, right? Every device doesn't have FaceTime capabilities on it. Number two, Apple doesn't give two rips about our enterprise use of their product. If we have questions or issues, or if there's security concerns or whatever the case may be, who are you going to call, right? You're not going to call, Apple doesn't care, right? The other thing is that we actually have security audits in place. Any device that goes on a managed any device that goes on our company Wi-Fi running applications has to be managed by our company. And
Yep.
you pulling out your personal cell phone using your personal Apple ID to do FaceTime calls is a security breach in our company. So I can fall back on that a lot.
Yeah, well, so I was going to say that's a big challenge that we have as well. Is it's not so much the ability to share video with somebody that's really helpful about remote assist. It's the fact that it's in an industrialized, containerized, application that makes it really important, right? Like it's been through like SOC 2, security, or ISO 27001 or whatever.
Yeah.
Like these types of audits are really important in the industrial space. And so I do think, and I will say that, we've done some testing with like, hey, what if we did this? Like, would it work? But if you're like trying to scale something, for instance, the security consideration is really, really important.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big piece of this. So
hey, but what about annotations, right? Can you do annotations in FaceTime?
Yeah, no, so you're exactly right. So
there you go.
Actually, I have a question. Well, so let's break
We're going to go
down.
to the Teams thing eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, let's break that down for a second. So annotations for us, which if you haven't ever tried a remote assist platform, the annotations are the ability for the person that you're calling, so the person sitting at a computer or on their phone, to be able to draw over the top of the person's vision that's out in the field. So for instance, if in our case, if you walk up to a cabinet of breakers, for instance, and you need to show somebody which breaker it is, instead of trying to tell them, it's 3 rows over and then it's like 14 down or something like that, you can just have them pause, and then you can actually draw an arrow or circle or do whatever on that person's field of view. Makes it really easy for them to find things that they're looking for, and it just adds context to the conversation. One thing I wanted to ask you about though is, with your experience with these types of applications, what do you think about spatially registered annotations versus like pictures where you annotate it and then it goes to their perspective? Because I'll tell you my opinion real quick. The challenge that we've run into with the kind of spatially anchored ones is that it looks great if they draw it like this, but you take a step to the side and it's completely off. Like you can't, you can't see or understand what that person's talking about. So I'm interested in your perspective there.
A lot of the same points that you're making, Dane, right? So spatial annotations are great if you want to have someone show you what to do, you want to do it, and then you want to come back, or you go down the line, you need to come back. It's a good reference point. But spatial annotations, right, aren't going to work if you try to use that software, right? So spatial annotations are only going to work on devices that have spatial abilities on it, right? Which we know are mixed reality headsets and handhelds, right? Because there are certain monocular head-mounted devices for the factory that are not spatial. And so what you get on there is you get non-spatial annotations, right? Like you were saying, Dane, which is the expert snaps a picture, draws on it, and then gives you the picture in your field of view, and you can see it. I think it's different strokes for different folks. It's different strokes for different use cases. And we have some guys in factories that prefer spatial, and some that are like, no, I really like the images because that way it looks the same and I can reuse that image, right, in other conversations or in guided workflows or something. So we see both, and I really don't have a preference, to be honest with you. It's all over the board.
So here's my thoughts on that. I think that the promise of spatial notation is really strong. I don't think that the technology from a tracking perspective is there yet. And so my personal preference for things that we're working on is having it drawn over a photo and then sent to somebody. It's not as sexy, right? But the thing is, it's the same perspective every single time. And I also think that if you're creating like documentation off of that, you can always go back and reference it and know what you're talking about. Whereas
you can reuse those assets.
So I think in my opinion, if I was a remote assist, or sorry, not remote assist, remote expert, software company, I would be focused on doing both and being able to choose one or the other. Because to your point, like there are use cases where one's important over the other, but I think despite not being as exciting to show people, it's a lot more practical in most cases to just annotate over the photo.
It's a good tangent to go off on, though, when you're talking about remote expert, right? It comes up all the time. I will say, right, so what makes, back to the Teams thing, right? What makes remote expert, right? Because people will say, well, I use FaceTime. Well, I use Teams. And yes, you can, right? There's nothing that's stopping my factory workers from using a device in the factory, doing a Teams call, and then just, whatever you got to do with your camera, right? That kind of stuff, because you in Teams, you don't get to go. So anyway, do that kind of stuff. Do you have to have annotations? Because typically the difference between a conferencing app like Zoom or Google Meet or Teams and remote expert AR platform, right? Application are those annotations. So if annotations are a requirement to do remote expert, then Teams isn't going to work, right? I tell people all the time, use Teams if you want. It's a company approved common platform. We all have it, all 50,000 employees or whatever. But if you need to do that on your head, or if you need annotations, we have another solution that we do that partially uses Teams. I'm happy to get into, but I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, Teams will make its way onto, in my opinion, and I have no insider, information or anything like that. This is just Dane hypothesizing, but I think eventually Teams will make its way into a lot of different things, right? Like that's kind of the goal of Microsoft, is to be an infrastructure, piece. I think the next question though is navigation within the app while you have a headset on, because like, Teams is not designed to be an augmented reality, headset application. It's designed to be something that you push buttons on your phone or you access through your computer. And so if you think about like the UI of how you use a headset, it's very difficult to use like a standard interface in a headset, right? And so I think, the Teams tenants are coming to other headsets, like for instance, like the RealWear or Android devices, for instance. I just don't think the user interface is quite there yet to where it's easy to, navigate around. And if you have an accent or something, navigating around in a voice recognition type of interface as opposed to like a gaze-based, interface. So, I think there's just kind of interesting challenges. The thing that's nice about the remote expert dedicated applications is that they're designed to be on the headset first, and then everybody's designed for phones and stuff. So you can kind of back into that. Makes it a little bit easier too.
So here's why I agree with you, right? Is because the reason why Teams is not on this device, right? Is because Microsoft realized that they needed to do a different application that uses different user inputs than Teams. So they created, of course, and not why they created, but they have Dynamics Remote Assist, right? Which we, we do a lot of Dynamics Remote Assist on the HL2 in the factory. The guy back at home or in the office or another facility on his laptop uses Teams and they can communicate. But the reason why it's not Teams on both is because exactly what you're saying. Teams isn't going to work there, and Teams is not a remote assist platform.
Yeah, it's not designed for that.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Well, and it's funny too, because even though you can get a Teams app on your phone, they still make remote assist applications for your phone as well.
You can use remote assist on your phone because it has annotations on it.
Yeah, for the context of the annotations and some of the other things.
So we do a lot of bringing up bad mouthing stuff, or here's obstacles or pitfalls. But let's talk about, what are the advantages and why is remote expert or remote assist so popular and bringing, how is it bringing value to the business, right? I know for us, it has saved and or made us millions of dollars, right? I'm not going to say exact amount, but it absolutely, for what we pay for it, And for the training and the devices, it makes and or saves us a lot of money. What about you guys?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I don't know if your experience is the same, Scott. So tell me if I'm wrong. But my experience was we were looking at remote assist for a couple years. Like let's say 2017 to 2019, and like we had some interesting use cases, and people were kind of excited about it because you put on a headset and it's kind of Iron Man-ish, right?
Yeah.
But up until that point, it wasn't like a huge use case for us, and then COVID hits, and
yeah,
that's a
everybody wanted to talk to Scott when COVID hit.
Yep, exactly. And so I obviously COVID's not been it's a horrible thing, right? Like I don't want to, but it's been very beneficial to the space, and the fact that I think it made us recognize that we have to be able to do work remotely, and it's not even an option anymore.
Right.
And so that's where a lot of the remote assist functionality that we use kind of got adopted.
Yeah.
And we started doing stuff like inventory audits remotely. And so instead of flying like 5 or 6 people to a facility and having our accountants walk around with the folks who are in charge of the inventory, the person who's in charge of the inventory puts on a headset, and then you remotely kind of bring your friends along, right? And along that process, the thing that was interesting to me was like, obviously removing the travel is it's an impactful thing, right?
Sure.
It's expensive to travel.
Yeah.
But the other part of it was we were actually able to more efficiently do the job than we have been in the past, because in the past you had to get 6 people in a golf cart and drive them around site, and everybody had lunch and needs bathroom breaks and all these different things, right? Well, now like you could have one person in accounting schedule 6 different meetings for an hour, and they could do 6 different sites in a day as opposed to one site in several days.
Right.
And so our kind of perspective on the efficiency of resources as a result of remote assist, I think, is really the impactful piece. It's not so much that like you remove travel because travel is expensive.
Yeah.
It's more of like, how do you look at the process that you have as a result of using remote assist and change it so that it's more efficient. And so like we would have like if we were to fly somebody there, it would take them a day to get there. Like the next day they would do the audit, and it would be like a 12 to 15 hour day, depending on how long it takes. And then the next day they'd spend traveling back. So you had like 3 days embedded into this process. And with the remote assist or the remote expert stuff, we would schedule time. It would take like 3 or 4 hours to do the audit, and then you're done. No travel on the front or back end. It's about a third of the time to actually do the audit. And so, if you look at the embedded time in that kind of situation, like it's pretty incredible the amount of reduction you can have just by, sharing video from somebody's headset.
We've had a lot of conversations about hard versus soft value realizations, right? Hard versus soft kind of, there's some benefits to remote expert. They're absolutely quantifiable, right? When we put remote expert, we didn't put remote expert in place and then stop traveling. We had to stop traveling, and so we put remote expert in place, right? Kind of like you guys did. So it could be arguably it's kind of chicken or the egg sort of thing. But even let's just say when like we experienced some of this last year, like right now we're in a little bit of a slowdown with the travel because of virus flare-ups and stuff. But when times are good, travel's free. You can still save money on travel, right? Quantifiable benefit. But there's a lot of those intangibles, like you're talking about, things that you really can't put a dollar amount to, but you got to tell that story anyway, right? I've had to do a lot of telling the story of, okay, now that we're back flying again, it doesn't mean we should just abandon remote expert, right? Because it'll still save us some travel time. It's also, I mean, to rattle off a few intangibles, right? You're home with your family more when you use remote expert. Things happen quicker, right? Sometimes things can be more accurate because now you have, in a lot of cases during a remote expert call, you have a video recording of that audit or that situation that you can go back and look at, get different perspectives,
You can
catch
take
things you
photos,
missed. Yeah.
as you go along. Yeah,
So there's a
I
lot
think
of soft benefits that you can't really put hard dollars to for the bottom line, on a budget, but it's
mhm.
still a good thing for the company.
Yeah, well, and I think it's interesting too, because like one of the things that's changed for us is we started by looking at, obviously internal stuff, right? Like how do we get people who are subject matter experts within our company to talk to, folks who are trying to execute the work, make that relationship, and then, work will get done. We've had other situations now where it's like, how do we pull contractors in for like doing quotations for work that they're getting ready to execute, right? So instead of having people from all over the world come to the site for a day that are engineering firms to go and look around, we do like Matterport scans so that they can look at approximate measurements and all that stuff. And then we have somebody actually physically go out in the field and they can walk around and people say, well, what about that right there? And then they can walk up to it, get whatever information they need, be able to, do that completely remotely. So, again, the transition that we went through was only being internal to internal external. The challenge, and this is where I was interested, from your perspective, what your thoughts are. The challenge with external is managing IP, or managing like, oh, well, do we want people to be able to see things that are in the video, all that stuff? Do you guys have to deal with that much?
Two thoughts there. One is that anyone who we're connecting on a remote expert call to, we've already got agreements in place with them anyway, right?
Right,
So,
fair enough.
so it's not like it's some,
Stranger.
hobo, off the street, right? So we've already got those relationships. We're not super worried about that, though our friends in the EU sometimes are more cautious about that. But the other thing is that
because of GDPR or
GDPR,
what?
exactly, yeah, and they just tend to be certainly more cautious about like, I don't want my face on a video. Who are you showing that to? It's kind of like my 12-year-old daughter, all of a sudden they're shy. It's like, come on,
Yeah. Well, that might be a whole other thing to go, like a whole
GDPR.
other episode, GDPR and how you manage global devices.
Yeah, that's tough. So
it
two
is.
things. One is that I don't really worry about it for two reasons. One is because we have relationships with the people that are on the other side of the calls. The other thing is that if it is the case where I'm in a headset and I've got 6 auditors that are looking through, tell me, all right, let me see this, that sort of stuff. If we want to just be super sure that we don't, because like in our facilities, we have customer products, and we don't like some of our customers, we have restrictive covenants with them where we cannot show their products in our factory, especially when those products are not in their final form, right? Because it's a degradation of their brand, and I get it. What we'll do is we don't even do the live streaming, or what we'll do is we will record the entire thing. Then we'll take that recording and go back in post-production and blur out faces and products, and then that's what we use, right? And so, so that way we know that anything that could be shared or used, we're protected on from faces blurred, and products. And I'll tell you, and sometimes the factory manager will say to me, it's kind of funny, say, hey, in that video, can you go like blur out like that trash that we had on the floor and stuff? I'm like, yeah, it's no problem, man. I'll go do a little Photoshop work on it, right, and clean it up.
Yep.
It's like, hey, that guy didn't have his PPE on, I'm like, all right, so then I'll go just put like a cartoon hat on the guy, and Mickey Mouse gloves and stuff, just to make it fun. But no, I don't worry about it.
You guys have to think about, maybe this is getting too in depth in a way from remote expert, but you guys have to worry about like intrinsically safe type of stuff?
No.
Because for us, one of the challenges that we have is, we have areas that are intrinsically safe, and then we have areas that are not intrinsically safe. And so that's one of the considerations when we're doing remote assist too, is like, what device can we actually do it on? And that's like, so like phones and tablets, we have cases and stuff that you can put on them, but like if you have a intrinsically safe RealWear or something, like, that you can use it anywhere in the facility, right? And so I think that specification is really important too for people to pay attention when they're buying their first headset.
Yeah.
Because if you know that you have intrinsically safe stuff, then like I would probably kind of bite the bullet and do that anyway, because you don't know where people are going to walk.
It costs more money, right? But and like I say, we don't have it, but if people listen to this podcast, take this piece of advice that, hey, you should consider that most of these devices have an intrinsically safe version of the device. It's going to cost more money, but you should look into that. Like RealWare's got a good intrinsically safe version of their HMT1. Just take a look at that. Yeah. But then there's some devices that don't, and if you've got to have it, well then okay, then stay away from that device family. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And it's a real challenge too. The thing I think that we learned kind of the hard way is that you don't know where people are going to walk either. And so if you put a headset on somebody and you have intrinsically safe and non-intrinsically safe areas, like either every time they go to use it, you have to notify them and say, hey, you can be in this area, you can't be in this area, or you have to just have the intrinsically safe version. And so I think that's a challenge too, is if you go the non-intrinsically safe route, then in order to be in compliance, you have to make sure that people are aware, or they get hot work permits or whatever in order to do that work.
So what about other, right? So like intrinsically safe is not an issue for us in our factories. It may be for some. You say it is in some regards
in some areas,
in your factories.
Well, the other thing to note is that every country has a different
countries
intrinsically safe guideline, right? So like China is different than the US, and that's different than Europe. And so generally though, like for instance the RealWare one, I believe is also like the blast proof certification for China as well. Whereas like I don't know if that's the case for HoloLens, for instance. And so like I think that's the other piece of this, is like you have the technological requirements that you have to meet, but you also have kind of the physical and environmental requirements that I think are important to consider.
And that's what we run a lot, or the other considerations, right? So we have a lot of very hot, very humid environments, right? And noise is a big thing for us, right? So maybe for a lot of people listening, right? So always take a look at these devices, right? If you can do remote expert calls, a standard device, most devices out of the box, right? I'll say a HoloLens 2, for example, or a RealWare HMT1. They're gonna noise canceling is going to work to a certain level. They'll always tell you, oh yeah, you're going to be able to do remote expert calls at 80, 85 decibels. I've not found it that high, right? We have to start doing, and I'll grab it to show you guys, right? We have to start pairing noise canceling over the ear, audio in, audio out devices, right? Yeah, aftershocks or sonetics, right? To take that decibel level that you can hear each other on up to, I mean, this device, we can get up, I think 105 is the loudest that we've tested it, but it was like you and I talking right now at 105 decibels, which is,
amazing.
Rock concert,
Yeah.
Well, so you got to think about not just the software and the use case. You got to get into the device. You got to start looking at peripherals. So there's a lot of factors to consider to be able to do effective remote expert calls.
And what's interesting too about remote expert, particularly if you're using a device that requires voice commands, is that not only do you have to consider the volume and the mic and all these things, you have to consider, like, does somebody have an accent? Does somebody have a speech impediment or speak differently in some way than somebody else? Because like there's been several times where we'll have people who are from our facilities in the South, and they have like a Southern draw, and like they may have challenges with, I don't know anybody like that.
I don't know anybody that's got a Southern drawl.
Yeah, but I mean,
it's true.
They have challenges too, where it's the way that people speak is important when you're giving commands. And so
and that's, you got to remember too, right? So we'll go back to the RealWare, right? Which is an audio only, voice command only app, device, and the applications. You got to remember or do a Tom Brady cheat sheet, on your forearm of what the commands are, right? Because it's not like, like zoom in with the camera. It's like zoom level 5, zoom level 3, zoom level 1. So you have to remember those commands, and the commands inside of the apps have to be different than the voice commands for the actual device, right?
For the native device.
Right. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind. You got to really look through. My advice would be, when you're putting remote expert in place, and and I know you feel the same as me, Dane. If anybody wants to
Mhm.
contact us about this, we'll be happy to explain it and walk them through this, but
Yeah.
and let them learn from some of our mistakes. But you got to really walk through what environment that user is going to be in, how they're going to be placing calls, who they're going to be
Yep.
talking to, what's the noise level, what's the heat, humidity, does it have to be intrinsically safe? What kind of features do they want to use in Remote Expert? Because we've talked about like there's the kind of these I talked something through earlier today. There's kind of the top 5 features that every Remote Expert platform known to man has, right? And there's hundreds
Mhm.
of them out there. But then there's ones that'll operate in super low bandwidth or
Yep.
have bandwidth throttling. There's all kinds of additional features that
Yeah, like
you could do.
LibreStream or something like that.
LibreStream does a great job with low
Yep.
bandwidth. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Well,
you give up some other things, right? It's
yep.
also a very complex user interface, right? So if
Yep.
you're going to go drive a Ferrari, there's going to be a lot of controls on that dash, right? You got to
Yep.
know how to operate.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and even like to your point, the accessories are important as well. So like I showed this, and obviously this isn't going to be something that you use in like a 105 decibel environment
Right.
or whatever. But the thing that's cool about, do you guys use bone conduction?
We do on the Trimble XR10, has bone
Okay,
conduction built in.
gotcha. Yeah, so like we just buy these cheap kind of Amazon, headset devices, and we do all the drop testing and stuff to make sure we can use it in a space that's, classified or
Mhm.
whatever. But they have these that have boom mics on them too.
Mhm.
And so what's cool about this is like you can put them on, you put your hearing protection in,
Yeah.
and it's just as good as like having a headphone in your ear. But
Yeah.
the thing that limits us, and the reason I'm going down this whole rabbit hole right now, is because we use what's called hear fit testing, and so you can only use particular kinds of hearing protection that have been determined to
Yeah.
effectively fit in your ear, and it's to make sure that we're limiting like exposure for OSHA and that kind of stuff. So in that case, though, like a lot of people would say, well, just use the headphones that come with the RealWear in the box. Well, you can't do that because you can't hear fit test on that, and so you end up with a situation where, like, hey, I need to be able to use my own earplugs and still be able to hear. And so that's why we use bone conduction, is because you can stick it on the outside on the bridges of your temple and be able to wear your hearing protection, but also hear the person on the other end of the line.
Now that device that you just put on your head, that's a Bluetooth device, right?
Yep, correct.
So here's something that you got to think of as well. Another
Yep.
kind of gotcha when you're talking about pairing a Bluetooth device with a head mounted device for Remote Expert. I'll tell you, I learned this lesson the hard way, right? Is that not every head mounted device that you could purchase to try and use for Remote Expert is going to work real well with Bluetooth connections for aftershocks and next kind of devices. I'll give you an example, right? So one of the devices that we use has the ability to connect through Bluetooth to hearing, right? But not to speech. So I can take that phonetics, I compare it to the device, and now I had a Bluetooth connection to the I got audio in portion of the headset, but the
Right.
microphone, the audio out, does not work because you can only do a connection for one or the other, not both at the same time. So then you have to do a USB-C external noise canceling mic, and next thing you know, you look like Medusa running around with
Yeah.
all this stuff hanging off your
You're
head.
Megatron with all your
Yeah,
add-ons.
there's a lot of like just little particular stuff, and I've gone around with these device manufacturers, accessory manufacturers, software manufacturers over the last several years about here's my use case, here's what I'm trying to do, and a lot of times it's, well, we don't do that, good luck. And it's like, just finding other people to work through some of this stuff with is tough. I'm glad we found each other, Dane.
I agree, Scott. I couldn't agree
I hope
more.
you always agree with that.
Yeah, for sure.
May not.
So I guess with that said, is there anything else that you wanted to kind of cover on the Remote Expert, side of the house? I know, we've jumped around between a bunch of different topics, and I think the other thing to consider is, I think I'm going to go out on a wild limb here.
Go on out there.
Reel me back in.
All right.
So I think Remote Assist changes in the future too, as LiDAR becomes more efficient and our bandwidth speeds become better. What I mean by that is, I think in the future, you could be in your HoloLens, look around your room, scan the room, and then whoever that you're talking to actually can like pause, rotate like the 3D environment and see different things without having you physically like go and move your head. And so you could have kind of streaming
360
of 360 streaming, but in LiDAR, so it's spatially accurate and all these things.
Okay.
So like I also think that it integrates with more things, right? So you might have guided workflows, right, where you directly integrate into remote assist or remote expert. And so that's actually a good segue maybe into the next episode, which will be
let's do guided workflows next. Yeah.
Yep. So
but you're on a futuristic rant. Go for it, man.
Yeah. No, I think that there's a lot of opportunities for kind of what you said about it's just video calling, right? I think the future of remote assist is much more than that. And I just don't know that the sensor suite and the supporting technology has gotten to a degree where it's easy to use. And so I think that easy to use thing is incredibly important in this space right now.
You heard it here first at XR at Work, folks. Futuristic view of predictions of remote expert. I'll tell you what I think remote expert's going to go, right? I think what's going to happen is, I've explained this to someone today, and this is out on a limb as well, right? But think about your phone. For maybe at my age, maybe not at your age, but I remember when you used to have to download an app to get a compass app, right, for your phone.
Right.
Now it's built in, right? And so whenever Apple and Samsung and these guys, the device manufacturers, started building that in, think about all the compass app development firms out there that went belly up, right? Because now it's free, built in the phone. I view remote expert as something that I think device manufacturers are going to start to build into their devices that allow you to call device to device, whatever the device is, laptop, handheld, head-mounted device, without using remote expert software. I'm looking forward to that day because I spent a lot of money on remote expert platforms. But I think that's where a place where it could go in the future. That's my future prediction.
No, so I agree with you, and I think we're saying a similar type of thing, just from two different angles. Like, I think that becomes commonplace in all devices, and I think that the current manufacturers or folks that are making remote expert software will have to push into a further unknown, which I think includes spatial and other different things. And so, as always, like, it's going to be kind of a spectrum, right? Like, do you want the free music app that comes on your phone, or do you want the one with the equalizer and all the stuff that you can do?
Right.
And so
there'll still be a market for the more advanced products, right? Because they won't,
for sure,
out of the box, they won't be with all the bells and whistles that someone can add in. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So cool. Well, I think that's all the time. We spent a while here now. So
I think we beat remote expert to death. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So Scott, as always, I really appreciate your time. And
absolutely.
And
I look forward to our next conversation. We'll talk again. You guys be sure to hit like and subscribe if you like this video, and let us know if you have questions. Leave the comments. Take a look at the show notes. We'll put some links in there, and check out all the other XR at Work podcast episodes that we have. Thanks again.
Take care.